mothers were told that children should be seen and not heard. Children were labelled as bold if they did anything that, wasn't pleasing to the parents. If they continued to be bold, they might have been smacked. In Ireland specifically, they'd be threatened with the wooden spoon. Babies, when they're born, parents are told your child is manipulating you. Don't spoil your child, don't pick them up, leave them to cry. And so this might have happened to the mothers themselves, and then they might have been doing that to their children too. So what happened in the past is that people didn't really necessarily think about how they were parenting. They just parented how their parents were parented.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. You are listening to Don't Be Afraid to Talk podcast with James. I believe if we are going to affect change, we must go back to the basic, which for me, in essence, is conversations. Talking and listening is key for growth, and I hope our stories will bring us together and we can draw inspiration from each other. Conversation will include topics such as mental and physical health, trauma and its effect, suicidal thoughts, recovery, and well-being. We will continue to raise awareness and offer a different perspective, a mindset or an idea that could inspire you to take charge of your well-being and to grow as a human being. Good. So, Katrina has joined me today to discuss various topics such as mother wounds, parenting, depression, anxiety, stress, and meditation. I hope you have an open mind, and I hope you can learn something from this episode. Hello.
Hello. Thanks a million for having me, James. I'm really excited to talk about all of these things. We've got a lot ahead of us today.
Yes, we do. Don't know how long we'll be here for. If you don't mind, Katrina, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, I suppose first and foremost, I'm a mum of two girls. And so that's my main passion in life. And then my second passion is psychology. So I run the website calmwithkatrina.com. And so what I do there is I provide free mental health resources for anyone who needs them. And so the main forum I use for that is writing articles in various different topics. And so some of the topics I'm going to speak about today, you'll actually find on my website too. So that's me in a nutshell. I suppose another passion of mine is art. And I also have a little Etsy shop, and I make lots of mindful art, so I kind of channel my own kind of mental health things through that, and it's a lovely release for me.
Super. Keeps you busy.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Before we get going, we're just going to play a little icebreaker, I call it. It's a show game.
Hit me.
It's a show game. It's called one for one. I'll give you a word and you say the first thing that comes to your mind.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
Yes. The first thing. So less thinking. You ready to go?
Yeah, go. Yeah.
So family.
Love.
Connection.
Oh, family.
Children.
Madness.
Mother
wound, because I'm talking about that today.
Rejection.
Oh, painful.
Time,
not enough of it.
Simple. That was easy.
Oh,
yeah,
very good. The psychologists would be all over that now, because the first thing that comes to mind, is kind of popping out of the unconscious there. So I'll have to listen back on that now myself.
Remember what you said.
yeah, exactly. I'll learn something.
Okay, we get going on our conversation today.
Lovely.
First, we're just going to hit on a topic that's called mother wound, a word that I only discovered just over 2 weeks ago. And I spent a lot of time trying to read up on it, so I hope you can give us some clarity on that.
Absolutely.
So just get going. What is mother wound?
Mother wound. So this is an absolutely huge topic. So I think you could be reading about this for a very long time. The first time I heard about the word mother wound was on social media. There's loads of accounts dedicated to this topic. And so there's loads of posts. And if you dig into the posts and the captions and the comments, what you hear is a large group of people talking about this gap that they felt, this feeling of being undermothered. And so for them, they've named it mother wound, which is wonderful, because in psychology it's great to name something, because as soon as you name it, you're noticing it, and that is the first step towards healing. And so to give you an idea of how the mother wound presents with people, this is kind of what a lot of people are kind of saying. So if you had a mother who you felt that their love was conditional, maybe you felt unloved, not as much as your siblings, you never felt accepted, you always needed to have her approval, you found it difficult to relate to her emotionally, maybe you felt that she wasn't supportive, you had to be the parent in the relationship and be her confidant when you were the child. She mightn't have respected your boundaries, this unrelenting feeling of that you have to be loyal at all costs, and that cost could be to your mental health, could be to your physical health, that your mother is number one. And so that's huge. The list also, this is not an exhaustive list, so there's lots of other things on that list. And I think basically it's for anybody who felt that there was a gap in their relationship with their mother. If you feel there was a gap, then that would be labelled as a mother wound. And so I think it's important, before we go into this in more detail, that this isn't about judging our mothers. And so we're not kind of coming in here going, our mother's awful, but actually it's more to look at it through a lens of compassion and understand maybe why our mothers were like this. And it's not to excuse their behaviour either, because mothers, of course, are accountable to their children, and they need to be the caregivers. But sometimes understanding it and feeling a sense of compassion can help you yourself in healing. And then maybe you might want to do additional things then to sort of close that wound. It's not something that you have to live with, is what I would say. There's lots of support out there. And so that's, I suppose, the gist of it. From a psychology point of view, I wouldn't label it as mother wound, but I would look at it as an attachment wound. And so I think stereotypically most people would be familiar with psychology. They think of Freud and they think of, it's always your mother. And there's, some truth to that. And it's really that what we would look for when you are an infant is that you form a secure attachment to your primary caregiver. And in society, in most cases in the past, that would be your mother. Things are changing now, so it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. But a lot of the research in that area relates to the relationship with the mother. And so if you have this attachment, it's a secure attachment. It can help you then in how you relate to the world, your future relationships, and just a feeling of being whole. And so if you don't have that sense of attachment, you can have this gap. And this is where the mother wound comes in, if that makes sense.
So would you say, from an adult's point of view, how an adult is shaped, it stems from that?
Yeah, so how you're treated as a child early on. So all of the research relating to attachment points to, if you have that, at least one good primary caregiver that gave you the love that you needed early on, that sets you up for life. And so it's not that you can't, you can't be a wonderful whole human being if you don't have that, but you'd have to work harder if you don't get that start in life. And so, and this is why a lot of people now, you see them, in their 40s and 50s talking about, feeling that mother wound. And obviously the mother might continue to act like that. So it isn't just how they act towards you in childhood, but also into later life. So through your teenage years and into adulthood as well.
Yeah. And from an adult point of view, say someone is in their 30s or 40s or whatever, which ways can that show up on someone? Because I don't think anyone likes to think that they have those, not neglection, but
Yeah. Well, I suppose if you kind of look at what I mentioned, so sometimes that feeling of not being good enough and, kind of not being able to be loved for just who you are, but maybe you have to always do things. So maybe you are constantly people pleasing and doing things for other people because you can't just be yourself. There's lots of different ways that it shows up. And yeah, so it's very individual to the person, I would say. But it's if you find yourself struggling with certain things in life, you could look back to maybe what your relationship was like with your caregivers, and just kind of think about, could that maybe have had an impact on how I'm seeing the world now? Because a lot of the time, how we respond to the world today is often through the lens of the past. And so getting aware of, how you were treated in the past can give you new insights to how you relate to the world today, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And would you say, from the mother's point of view, so they're obviously reacting from their own wounds, from their own mother?
Exactly. So actually what I was going to mention was, so if you go back to our mother's generation, I'm going to kind of mention the Irish context specifically, but some of this is applicable, kind of around the world,
everywhere.
Especially I suppose Western kind of ways of parenting specifically. So mothers were told that children should be seen and not heard. Children were labelled as bold if they did anything that, wasn't pleasing to the parents. If they continued to be bold, they might have been smacked. In Ireland specifically, they'd be threatened with the wooden spoon. Babies, when they're born, parents are told your child is manipulating you. Don't spoil your child, don't pick them up, leave them to cry. And so this might have happened to the mothers themselves, and then they might have been doing that to their children too. So what happened in the past is that people didn't really necessarily think about how they were parenting. They just parented how their parents were parented. Whereas now we've started to think about and make conscious decisions of, when you become a parent, what type of parent do I want to be? How am I approaching this? And we have much more resources now too. So we've got the internet, we've got books, we can listen to podcasts, we can do lots of things that just weren't available to parents back in the past. And specifically for mothers in Ireland, the patriarchy played a huge role in shaping mothers. And if you look at the likes of how single mothers were treated in mother and baby homes, mothers in the past couldn't get contraception, they weren't allowed abortions, they couldn't get divorced. If civil servants had to leave their job once they got married, it wasn't okay to be gay. There was huge racism in society and a huge stigma around mental health. So all of these things are not helpful in helping you become an amazing caregiver. That's a lot of pain, a lot of trauma on a generation of people. So when I say kind of to look at this through a lens of compassion, this is what I'm talking about. There's an awful lot of pressure on previous generations, and people just didn't have a voice in the way that maybe they have today. It's not perfect. We've loads of work to do, but that generation and generations before that had a very difficult time.
So it's having it's a knock-on effect, and from previous generation. And if you don't deal with it, if you don't process those wounds, most likely your children will pick them up, if you like.
Exactly. And I think the good thing now is that people are starting to think about this and notice these things. And so a lot of parents nowadays, where if, say, for example, if they have a mother wound or they have another type of trauma that they're aware of, and they're worried about passing it down onto their children, the one thing I'd say is that the fact that they're thinking about it is a very good sign, because the likelihood of them passing it on in exactly the same way is much lesser as a result. And usually those people, are the ones that are really working to break the cycle. So they are doing, an amazing job in even kind of getting to that place, because that cycle might have continued for generations to generations, and it's huge, and it's something we don't see. People carry this weight around with them, and we don't see it on them, so I think that's why the compassion lens is really important.
So this can still operate in someone that's obviously left the parents' home, and someone in the 40s living a separate life to their parents. They can still suffer from these wounds.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if the wound is there and they have that feeling, if you ignore something, it stays there and it doesn't go away. Exactly. And now we know that, so if we're talking about kind of traumatic wounds specifically, those things live in the mind and they live in the body. And the body is something that has been hugely ignored up until, say, the last 40 years. Now we know that it lives in both the body and the mind, and you need to look at both of those things. So even, say, if I was reading that list of the mother wound, you can have a reaction, like, say, somewhere in your body, you might feel it in your stomach, and that can tell you maybe there is a little bit of, kind of a wound in there that maybe you want to think about.
Yeah, yes. If you're processing something for a long period of time, and you're in your 30s or 40s, 50s even.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. It is a lot of work to be done. That's it. And I'd say don't let that put you off. So if you're kind of realizing this now, there's no better time to start than now. And it's just to recognize that, yes, if you're healing a wound that's been with you for a long time, and if it's a very big wound, it takes time. So again, put the compassion lens on yourself. Know that you've been carrying this for a long time, and well done to you, because you've functioned and you've survived in that 40, 50 years to get here, and now you've realised it. And then maybe it's something good that you can do for yourself, because you deserve it. No one deserves to be carrying around a wound, that, especially one that wasn't, no one deserves that wound, and it doesn't necessarily, it shouldn't make up who they are. So definitely, if you're thinking about your healing journey, like I said, no better time than today.
Yeah. You mentioned that healing journey. It's a journey rather than a quick fix, or let me do this for 3 months or 21 days.
Exactly. So a lifetime of anything, is not going to be solved in a few weeks. So just know that, but things can get better, a few weeks of any type of support. So whatever it looks like to you, it could be just talking to friends. It could be, going for a more formal help via therapist, something like that. Anything that you do will mean that you're in a better place than you were maybe before you started it. But the journey isn't an easy one. It's called work for a reason, but it's very much worth it. Yeah.
Just what we're speaking about parenting, there's a lot of we put more attention on the physical, if you like, as in, like, you'd often judge, we shouldn't be judging parents, but you often would judge a parent based on how the kids behave, or how you see the kids behave, in that sense. So in one way, we're not really focused on the quality of the relationship they have with a child. We're more focused on what we can see.
Yeah.
So is there such a thing as a good parent?
I think so. And what I'd say is, rather than say good parent, I'd say good enough parent. So it's not, definitely you don't have to be perfect. So you just have to be good enough. And a good parent, loses their temper. A good parent messes up. And so it's not that you're this perfect robotic computer of a parent. We're human. So it's what you do in that. So if your parent sees, or if your child sees that you've messed up, or you've hurt their feelings, and you actually say sorry for that. You say, listen, I lost the head. I'm feeling very tired. I've had a long day in work and I snapped at you. And actually, if I could do it again, this is what I would have done. Can we start again? And having that open communication with children, versus just being the authority and just kind of going like, listen, get up to bed now, go to sleep. I'm sick of you. There's alternative ways to do things. And even things like, parents, maybe they have a fight, and the kids hear it. Rather than just kind of like hush, just kind of bring the child in and say, if you raised voices, actually, mommy, maybe I should have not raised my voice. If I could do it again, maybe we could do this. And just let them see, you talking through conflict in a healthy way, and knowing that, conflict can be resolved and you don't have to run away and things like that. So if they see modeling of good behavior, there's a lesson in everything. And of course, then everyone has their good days, and kids remember that, and they give you the benefit of the doubt, and you should give your kids the benefit of the doubt too, because kids are impacted in the same way we are. And if anything, children are learning they're learning what their emotions are. They're learning what they feel like. And so a lot of the time emotions can become overwhelming for children. And so if you see that, said, a parent in the supermarket and the child is down on the floor screaming their head off, they might have spent the whole day in childcare and they're exhausted and just want to get home to bed and they're hungry. And so you can make a split judgment on that parent. And, you know, actually it's literally just that moment. And I think when you become a parent, you realise the day-to-day challenges, and actually, again, put the compassionate lens on, and it can be anybody. Like, nobody's perfect. And with enough pressure on anybody, you know, the lid can kind of come off and you can end up, like, you know, not having a great response. And other days you might. Yeah.
Just in relation to modelling the culture we're living in of not enough, if you like. So everyone's trying to paint a picture of having it all together.
Yeah.
And so how important is it for parents like to model the behavior of a normal person that goes through ups and downs, and instead of just trying to look like someone that has it together?
Absolutely, because nobody has it all together. And I think it's very important for children to realise that, you know, because if they don't, they will go through a moment where they feel like, you know, oh God, I don't have it all together. And if they think everyone else does, that's going to, you know, do them harm. So if they see, you know, that's it, the normal day-to-day ups and downs, and you communicate that to the child in an age appropriate way. So I think it's important as well that, you know, you think about how much you're sharing with them and the way that you share it with them. And so it goes down to, you know, how old they are, and always think about, so if we go back, say, to the mother wound, people get these wounds because maybe their parent was oversharing things. So things that, you know, that a child shouldn't be, you know, kind of having to listen to. But there's ways to model those type of things in an age appropriate way. So it's just being aware of that. And so you're kind of, I suppose, to go to the idea of mindfulness, you are acting in your life, but then there's also, you're observing as well. So you're kind of noticing then how you're speaking to your children, and kind of having that awareness can help you. So you're not on autopilot, you're consciously thinking about how you're describing things to your child, and you can take a step back then and go, actually, am I doing this too much, or am I overstepping a boundary as well? But again, don't put too much pressure on yourself. You might, you know, again, you mightn't do it perfectly every day, but it's just, like I said, back to the good enough parent. So once you do it most of the time, you know, as good as you can, that's all you need.
Yeah, because there's a lot of external pressures, if not more now than ever before.
Exactly. And you can go onto social media, and you can go onto Instagram, and there's so many perfect parents there, and you can come off social media and feel absolutely awful. But that's the highlight reel, you know, and you don't see what happens off stories and things like that. So just remember that you don't see the full picture with anybody. You know, I'm sitting here, I'm fully dressed. This morning, you know, I was in my jammies, breakfast in my hair, trying to get kids out to their summer camp, you know. So we all have our moments, and I think that's important to, you know, to be mindful of that.
Yeah, and if you come home from work, if you like, and you obviously want to do a good job, but you're just so overwhelmed with stress from work.
Yeah.
And is that where the self-judgment comes in, where people start thinking, oh, I'm not doing a good enough job because... Yeah. And there can be a lot of shoulds in people's heads. And so if you flip the, I should be doing this, but I could be doing this, that can sometimes help. And so if you say I could, that can give you lots of different options. So one thing can be, I get home from work and I have to keep working because I have just too much pressure on me. Another thing could be, I get home from work and I will do 10 minutes of playtime with the kids, and then maybe I need to disappear and finish my work. But another day I'm going to do more time. And also it's quality time over quantity. And so the research shows that too. So sometimes 10 to 15 minutes of like getting down at eye level. If we're talking about younger kids, down at eye level, talking to them, asking them how the day was, playing with them. But you don't have to be playing with them for 8 hours a day to get the same
impact. And so we often look at what we're not doing, but we should look at what we are doing. And most of the time, if you are making yourself feel bad about that, you are very much likely to be doing enough as it is. And you're also going to work and you're earning a living to help, your family, have a house, have food. And so all of those things, are things that are needed and children recognise as well.
Yeah. Because I think with children, you mentioned that the quality, not the quantity. So
exactly.
They want a parent that's present with them.
Exactly. And if you think of even children's memories, they don't remember every single moment of their entire lives, but they will remember these lovely moments in their lives. So your 10 minutes a day that you're like, oh, I'm not doing enough. That might be what they remember as, oh my God, my dad was amazing. We always played together, and they think of those days. And so you're giving yourself such a hard time for no reason.
It's not helping anyone. No. I just want to touch on anxiety on children. Obviously, how adults and children experience anxiety is different.
It is.
In terms of physical anxiety and emotional anxiety and behavior anxiety, from children's point of view, like what kind of things can we look at for to identify if your child's going through stress? Because
definitely. And I think, first of all, kind of, if you look at anxiety, ultimately what it is fear. So the child is afraid of something, and that can be helpful to kind of use a different word sometimes, because sometimes anxiety can have like a sort of medical kind of label. And it can feel a bit scary. So if you just kind of think of the child as, okay, they're afraid of something, what is it? Whatever it is, if we're talking about anxiety, or even if we're talking about other things, we're looking for changes. So it can be changes in the child's behaviour. It can be changes in, so you said physical things that have changed, or behavioural things that have changed. So even if you don't remember the things that I mentioned now, just be looking for those things. And it's really important to really just be tuned into your child and know what normal is for them, because normal is different for every child. And so you will notice as a parent something's off. And so if we're kind of looking at physical things for children, it can be things like wanting to go to the toilet much more often, because their bladder's just like they're just got that nervous energy and they're just wanting to kind of go to the toilet. It could come through in bedwetting, and especially in the night time. And so that can be for other reasons too. But if you see bedwetting, rule out the medical. It could be UTI or something, but then think about, are they afraid of something? There's something bothering them. But they also might have other things in their body that you spot. So things like tics, can just be like little movements in their heads, or like winking kind of more. Tapping their feet, tapping their hands, and you just kind of see them. If they normally don't do that, and you spot anything like that, that could be a sign that they're feeling a little bit fearful of something. One thing specifically about bedwetting, which is important, is never make a big deal about it. And for any of these things, you can notice them and you can explore the reasons for them, but never be like, oh my God, you're after wetting the bed. What's going on? Because that can end up leaving them with a sense of shame as well. So, just treat it as this has happened, totally fine. Let's look at why. That can ease the symptoms, especially for a child who's already afraid of something. You don't want to compound that further. If we look at emotional things, so again, just changes. So changes in mood. And when you mentioned things being different between adults and children, one thing that adults can miss is if a child is really angry, really frustrated, acting out, they can miss that as signs of anxiety. So they might kind of look at the anger and start disciplining them and kind of going, you're out of order. You threw this at your sister. You've been slamming doors, and this is not acceptable. And that can shut down the child communicating any further. So if you kind of look at with children, behaviors and anything like that, and it's a message. So because they don't necessarily have the words in the way we do as adults to express themselves, and they don't necessarily understand how they're feeling, so it's really just like a ball of emotion, and they are just acting out. So that can be really helpful. If you shut that behavior down, you might not see it, and so then you can miss their anxiety. Other things would be more traditional things that you might find. So you kind of see your child constantly worrying or ruminating about things, like they could be really worried about a test in school, or just worried about kind of going into school and things like that. And just crying more often. Of course, all of these things can be other things too. So it's just sort of noticing, that there's something different here, and it could be fear, it could be something else. Then behavioural things. So again, anything outside the norm. So children often don't sleep, but if your child is waking more than normal, that can be a sign that maybe something's up, especially if they're kind of saying things like, I'm having bad dreams, and maybe they're getting up a little bit later and having difficulty getting to sleep as well. That can be a sign that something's on their mind. Changes in their eating behaviour. So if they're suddenly eating loads and they normally don't have a big appetite, or vice versa, they're not hungry, that can also be a sign of anxiety, and it's a good one to look for, because kids love eating most of the time. You're constantly handing out snacks, so that might be a first thing that you notice with kids. And then things just like more clingy, restless, and avoiding any type of activity, then that can be a sign. So and even things like, oh, I've got a pain in my tummy, and you might look to like, oh, okay, let's bring it to the doctor, let's do this, but just consider anxiety then, or fear in the back there. Maybe there's something there that's kind of driving the tummy pain. Yeah. So there's lots of things there, and again, it's not exhaustive. Every child is different, so you again just looking at differences in your own child,
understanding. Yeah. So like for them, if they obviously don't have the words to describe how they feel, and even adults don't have the words to describe how they feel most of the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So for children, they might lash out. So and instead of disciplining them, as in like stop it, like shouting at them, if you like, is it a case of trying to understand what's causing that behavior? Like if they do it 2 or 3 times, obviously something is causing that behavior.
Yeah, definitely. And it's sort of striking the balance as well, because like there is certain boundaries where, like, you can't just let a child, like, physically
go crazy
somebody either. And so there can be some things that, hey, listen, like we have a thing called family rules in our house, and if somebody's sort of going outside the family rules, they'll say, hey, I just want to understand what's going on here. I see that you've hit your sister, and that's not in the family rules, but listen, normally you don't hit your sister. What's going on? Help me to understand. And then just kind of ask them questions, and you can do things like, sometimes when I feel this way, I do this. Is this what's happening with you? So don't tell them what it is, because sometimes they lash out more. So if you tell them, oh, you are anxious, they'll be like, no, I'm not, and they will kind of go off, and you can be wrong as well. So they mightn't be anxious, it could be something else. So just kind of keep the questions open-ended, help them to name their emotions, especially younger children. You might just need to go to the basics of, you sound really angry, and I see you thumping, punching pillows. Sometimes people do that when they're angry. Is that how you feel? And then you'll see them slowly learn. So it's kind of, even if it doesn't go perfect when you do have this conversation, 5 conversations later, you're going to see them start to use the language that you've been using with them, and their go-to then mightn't be to punch or whatever it is that they're doing. Their go-to might then suddenly be to communicate with you, because you've taught them how to do that, and they know it's safe to do that. That you're not going to shut them down, and you're not going to punish them for being honest about how they feel.
So in the learning phase, then it's more important to kind of get the information out of them, so they understand it for themselves. Instead of you telling them.
Yeah, exactly, because you can tell them and you might get it wrong. So it's really just asking questions. It's like even with adults, if I tell you, you are really stressed today, James, and you're like,
no, I'm not.
Might be stressed after I asked you that.
No, I'm not. What you mean? I'm stressed.
Exactly. And then I will miss the opportunity to figure out what is actually going on, because I've sort of broke the circuit there where we've kind of connected, so just being understanding, and just that safe space where they can talk.
Good stuff. Great. Just in relation to, we focused a lot there about children, just in relation to adult,
Yeah.
coping with their own stress. And how an adult person, who's stressful. And first of all, what is stress? Because this number of ways a person can be stressed. There's like a short-term stress, there's a long-term stress, which is more dangerous. So, what is stress? Like, what's happening when a person is feeling stressful?
Yeah. So I suppose stress, there's sort of a physiological response happening when you go through stress, and the stress can be anything. It's all relative. To my experience of stress can be different to your experience of stress, but it's something that has kind of knocked you out of whack. So normally we are in this state of what we call homeostasis, which is balance. And so for example, us with the podcast today, naturally we would feel a little bit stressed in advance of going into this, and a little bit of stress is good.
That was me earlier on. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was the same, and that's totally normal. So if you're doing anything, you're doing a presentation in work, you're about to do an exam, you're going to feel this little bit of stress. And what happens then is that your body's sympathetic nervous system, the part of your nervous system that's ready for action, is activated. Totally normal. When we finish the podcast, we'll go and have our dinner, we'll go back to normal, and we feel good, back into the state of balance. If something happens, so we experience just something that makes us sad day to day, our parasympathetic nervous system is activated, and that can make us feel a bit sluggish. It can make us feel a little bit down, but usually we go back to normal as well. And so stress then, regular stress is fine, and we naturally go through those processes. But what happens is then if you have chronic stress or a life event that takes you by surprise, that can knock your system out of whack. And that's where then you can end up kind of maybe in your sympathetic is activated much more. And this is where you might be in a state of anxiety all the time. So you're just like constantly kind of like feeling on edge and highly activated. You can't sleep, or maybe you experience a loss, a death or whatever, and then your parasympathetic is the one that's more activated, and then you just find it really hard to get out of bed, and everything is an effort. Putting on your clothes is an effort. And so anywhere you find it difficult to just get back into that normal state and something's off, this is where maybe you need to kind of do something about the stress. But there are things that you can do anyway before that ever happens. If you put them into practice when something really stressful or traumatic on the other kind of extreme happens, you sort of have a toolkit to look after yourself. And this is like the ultimate self-care. So you're practicing these things now so that you have the tools if you need them in the future. Of course, who knows what's going to happen, and you can't have all the tools, but it just having a little bit practice and experience with some of these things will help you stay then in that kind of balanced state for longer. That would be the ideal, if that makes sense.
So if you can practice on little things.
Yeah,
little
exactly.
things. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And when you practice, those things become automatic, so they kick in, kind of without you realizing, because stress is an automatic response too. So you have no choice really how your body responds. There's different stress responses that come out, and especially if it's something that takes you by surprise, you can go into, you're probably familiar with fight or flight, and there are other stress responses too. But kind of knowing then what to do to kind of get yourself back down to feeling good then is very beneficial overall for you.
Can you just please explain what is stress first aid? What is that?
Stress first aid. So this is actually, these are the things that you can do then, I suppose, first of all, to recognize if you are in a state of stress. And then where you recognize those things, then there are things that you can do then to reduce the stress. And it's also recognizing some of the risk factors too. So for example, in work, you might notice that, okay, if I am not prepared for the meeting on Friday, I get really stressed and I can't sleep, and it actually impacts my weekend as well because I'm kind of coming down from, the stress. You can do something maybe to remove some of those risk factors, and that can be like preparing a little bit more, relaxing a bit more. And actually probably what I'll mention is, so I use the acronym Take Your Meds, and if you do this regularly, they can help you in all areas of stress, and this would be part of your stress first aid, if this makes sense. So when I talk about take your meds, I'm talking about meditation, exercise, diet, and sleep. And so I can go into those in a little bit of detail if you'd like.
No, we definitely talk about that. And what is some of the healthier ways to reduce stress? Like if you're constantly stressed, obviously something is not right. So
I suppose this is kind of getting into the awareness. So you've noticed that something is off. So noticing is the first step into making some changes. And then you need to kind of go, okay, I actually do need to make some changes. And it can be big changes. It can be small changes. Sometimes small changes can help. And it's individual to each person what those changes might be. It could be maybe if they're in a job and they're constantly, like, they hate it, they don't like the environment, they find it really toxic. Maybe it's making a bigger change, like moving jobs, or maybe it's making some adjustments and maybe talking to somebody like your manager or talking to HR, things like that. So if you sort of are in the driving seat, having that control can also help you reduce your stress too. If you feel like you're powerless, that can not do good things for your stress levels too. So I think first of all, just always be reflecting on things, and it could even be as simple as keeping a regular journal, and where you feel stressed, just write it down. Ignore the formatting and the grammar and all of that, and just get it all out, all the stresses out, put the date, and just keep an eye on and just see if there's patterns there. And it could be completely not even relating to work, it could be something else. So just keeping a physical record can help too. There's loads of different things that you can do to reduce your stress. And if you're struggling then to kind of find answers, then it could be just looking at what supports are available to you, in your life. So it can be talking to other people, and it depends on what type of stress it is, or maybe you want just to work with someone like a life coach or something. There's lots of ways to reduce the stress, and you don't have to suffer it alone.
Yeah, I do. You mentioned journaling there. I do that quite a bit myself.
Yeah.
I think if I put it on paper, like for me, I think if I put it on paper, it comes out of my head.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. And you can sometimes put a timer on it as well. And you can say, okay, I'm going to get all my stress out, but I'm only giving myself 15 minutes. And after that, I'm parking the worry and I'm going to focus on something else. And so sometimes that can be enough, because you can end up letting it take over. And then that can impact other areas of your life. Whereas if you just kind of control it a little bit, give it time, because you can't ignore it, but just give it its time, and then go, okay, that time is done, I'm going to look at something else for a little while. It can be very good.
And another thing you mentioned, the environment, and that obviously plays a huge part of our well-being, if you like. And our stresses, if you're in the wrong environment, you could find yourself more stressed than being in a separate environment. And this in relation to being in touch with nature, because I think some people find that calming, if you like. Is that something that you recommend as well? Just going out?
100%, absolutely. And so the environment is huge, and for some people in particular, if you're kind of a more sensitive person, or you're hugely empathic, actually getting away into nature. But really for everybody, there's a lot of research backing up that getting into nature helps. And so it can be your local park, but the research shows things like getting into the actual forest, and being surrounded by trees. There's something that happens when you're in environments like that, and the trees release certain things, and the smells and everything are different. So there's a lot of research there. I do actually on my website have resources there that goes through all of the research and things that you can do. But this is practiced all around the world. So Japan is probably the most well known for forest bathing, and they definitely have set the standard in terms of doing that. Aside from forests, getting out into to the beaches is wonderful as well. I'm a big sea swimmer, and that does a couple of things. So again, you have sort of the nature boost, but if you actually get into the water, the cold water in Ireland is actually beneficial if you can brave it. In that, if you're in a state of stress, when you get into the cold water, it kind of basically shocks the nervous system into sort of like a reset. And so it can kind of take you out of maybe like kind of where you were at there. And it just has a naturally calming effect on the system because you're really being held by this body of water, the motion of the waves. It's very like meditative feeling. And so there's many benefits. And so really kind of the outdoors and just disconnected from technology. And that's it, just kind of doing your thing. Absolutely. I'd really recommend that. If you could do one thing, it's free. And it's a lovely thing to do.
Get out in nature, and you don't even have to have anything for that. You just have to get out for a walk and put your phone away, maybe after you take your pictures.
Even leave the the phone at home if you want to, or just put it on like airplane mode and only use it for taking photos if you want. But even just take in the moment and don't bother about photographs. Just like taking all the sights and the sounds.
Yeah, and with a cold sea as well, that's more of, it's the shock to your body that's kind of...
Yeah.
What you don't have time to think when that happens.
And actually, because like when you go in when you dunk into the water, you take this massive big breath of air, and that is hugely like beneficial, and because often we struggle to take a proper breath. And if for anyone who's new to doing breath work, often we're not breathing, we're breathing sort of at the top of our chest, we're not breathing into our belly, and that you have to train yourself in terms of how to breathe in a way that's helpful. And so the sea does that naturally for you, because you're just going to take the biggest breath of your life, and everything about it then afterwards you're going to be flying for the whole day. I actually had a sea swim today, and I'm 100% feeling that way.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. I think I'll stick to my cold shower for the moment.
And that's the thing, actually, cold showers have the very same impact if we're just talking specifically about that. So if in the morning you're getting up and you're kind of feeling stressed about work, that can be actually quite a good thing to do, is to just go on and literally get under the cold shower, because for even those few seconds you're not going to be thinking about work. You're going to be like, oh my God.
Get me out. Bad idea.
And you can cool it right down, or you can start with a warm shower and then start to make it cold as well. Yeah. So any of those little things do help, and it's just going to get you breathing. And when you're breathing nice and calm, steadily, that helps, because the oxygen goes to your brain, gives you a little bit of a boost. And so there is science behind it as to why it makes you feel good.
Yeah, no. Go straight in, turn it into cold, jump in. Might as well.
On the other side of things, so there is actually some research showing that. So if you have a bath kind of 1 to 2 hours before you go to bed, if you're lucky enough to have a bath, specifically at 37 degrees, that is supposed to help give you 1 or 2 hours extra sleep. So if you want to try that, if you happen to have a bath, that can be really good.
A cold bath?
No, a warm bath, 37 degrees.
Jesus, yeah.
Yeah. No, if you have a cold bath, you're not going to sleep. Going to be shivering.
No, not that. And just in relation to breathing, that kind of, it's associated with meditation.
Yeah.
So, first of all, what meditation is one of those, I think anyway, one of the best things we can do, but it's also one of the things that no one knows what to do. So what's your take on meditation? I'm guessing there's no like, oh, try this worked for me, so it will work for you.
Yeah. The thing is with meditation, I think sometimes people can feel like it's not accessible to them, because there's this sort of like vision of what meditation is, and it's sort of like sitting on the side of a mountain for hours and having all the time in the world to...
A yogi under a tree, yeah.
Exactly. And so that's really difficult, because I definitely can't do that, and no one has the time to do that, and that's not the expectation. And so meditation can be something as simple as when you wake up in the morning, giving yourself 5 minutes to arrive into the day. So rather than just being awoke by the alarm clock and jumping up, and you're suddenly got kids all around you and you're just trying to get out of the house and all of that stuff, it can be just making that time 5 minutes, and it can be just as simple as, how is my breath when I wake up? And naturally just listening to the breath, is it fast, is it slow? And then thinking about how your body is as well, so checking in. So sometimes if you've not had a good night's sleep, you can be quite stiff in the shoulders and the neck, you could be tensing a lot. your jaw could be stiff. So all of those things give you information that can help set you up for the day, because maybe you could decide then later on, actually, I'm going to do a little bit to kind of help that, or maybe you'll just, hold yourself in a different way. But giving yourself that time means that you're not starting the day in a highly activated way, so starting already stressed. Because you've plenty of time to be stressed, so don't give the first 5 minutes of your day. Don't let that be a stressful time. Yeah,
the day will stress you out anyway.
Exactly. And so then if you want to build on that, there's lots of ways you can do it. And I'd say try and build it into your day. So if you're working in an office, or if you're working from home, it can be just scheduling in regular breaks where you just take some time to again, focus in on the breathing. Maybe you want to add to it. So maybe you want to kind of say like, breathe in for 4 breaths and out for a bit longer. There's many different types of breathing exercises. And so it's start little by little and you can build it up. And there's lots of resources online that you can find and that can help you. So rather than putting all this pressure to do it perfectly, do your good enough version of meditating as well and build it up. And if you find that you like it, brilliant. And another thing actually is that you don't have to be sitting still to meditate. So there is actually some research that shows that, say, the reason why the likes of exercise works is because it is meditation of a sort, in that, say, for example, you're running at a certain pace, you're breathing at a certain pace, and just the repetitive nature of different types of exercise, if it's lifting weights, if it's cycling, if it's swimming, if it's walking, it's running. You're doing all of those things, and so you're doing it for a period of time. Your mind is clear because you're focusing only on that task. Exactly. So if you're somebody who maybe is feeling very stressed and you've got loads of extra energy, maybe sitting still, you might be too twitchy to do that, but getting out and moving can actually help release that energy and get you focused as well. And maybe you end it with something like a more traditional meditation. So that can be very helpful as well. So it's not one size fits all. It's whatever your lifestyle is like and thinking how you can fit it in into the life that you have.
Yeah. So you don't have to wait until the end of the day to meditate. You can do it during your break time.
Exactly. And to build on to the idea of mindfulness as well. So even like, say, myself and yourself are here talking away, like if you build in a sense of awareness in your meditation practice, really that is just kind of you speaking, but also you as an observer. So you can be kind of thinking, so now I'm thinking, am I speaking too fast? What's my breath like? And that can slow you down. So even if you are in the middle of a work presentation and you're like going really fast and you're like, oh, this is going really bad, just take literally 1 second to notice that, and that can actually kind of bring you back down again. And it can help you then, so you're sort of doing it as you go, and all of those things add up to wellness. And so it's not that one thing is going to help. There's lots of different things that you can do.
With meditation as well, what most people say is I can switch my mind off. I don't think the purpose of it is to switch the mind off, is it? It's more.
No, and again, it's noticing. So if you are doing a traditional meditation where you're sitting there and you're breathing and thoughts keep popping into your head, just notice them. And you can even just kind of have this dialogue saying, I recognize you're there right now, I'm meditating, and just kind of keep doing that, and it's okay. At the beginning, you're going to have thoughts pop in. Like, I think,
at the start, it's like,
exactly
what's going on.
And it depends as well, completely day. You can have one week of, oh God, I'm doing amazing now, no thoughts pop into my head, and then next week it's all back to the beginning. And I think if you meet yourself where you are in your practice, when you're practicing this, there's no judgment, it's all compassion, and it's just awareness of where you're at. And there's some times in your life where you're going to feel more stressed, and there's some times in your life where everything's going really well. It's up and down. Luckily, the downs don't last, the ups come back, and it's just that cycle. Yeah,
so if you have one bad day or bad week, you can just pick up again, because I think if you have a very bad week, come Monday, if you like, someone might be like, oh, I don't want to do this. It didn't work last week. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a case of trying it again, if you like.
Exactly. And just being kind to yourself, because if you can't be kind to yourself, like, the way, who else is going to be kind? You need to rely on yourself at least to be looking after yourself, and get rid of the shoulds. I should be having a clear mind. So one of the options is I could have a clear mind. Another is I could have thoughts popping in and out, and that's okay. And I'll work through it and do my best. Yeah.
There is meditation for children as well, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. And so children are naturally just much more, kind of energetic. And so a lot of the mindfulness practices for children are much more playful, and they bring in lots of different elements. And sometimes it can be physical things as well. So them making things like mindfulness jars and kind of helping educate them, I suppose, in terms of exactly kind of what's going on and what are these thoughts. Because for them, whatever about us trying to get rid of thoughts popping in there, that is their life, so it's sort of an educational piece as well, and definitely but if you're into meditation, it can be nice to practice with your children as well. I can guarantee it won't go
to plan.
They'll be all over the place, but it is lovely, and that can be very calming, because one thing that's very important is that for all humans, connection is what we need. Whatever we're doing, connection is important. And so us just being close to our kids and to other adults has this calming effect automatically. And so that can be just sitting together with somebody can be like meditation itself, even if you're not doing a traditional practice.
Yeah. And I think with children as well, they don't have the mind of an adult that's dwelling on tomorrow, the day after that.
And actually, you might get a lot from your children as well, which is the thing. So you can kind of see that, they can let things go, and, the playful side of them is something that we can learn from, especially for adults who may be, and if we went back to the mother wound, if they kind of have a mother wound, or maybe they've gone through trauma, or they have an emotionally immature parent, playing is something that can be quite difficult for them as an adult. So actually reconnecting with play when you have children can be a wonderful way for everybody to learn.
Yeah, reconnect back to your...
Yeah.
The child in you still wants to play. Yeah.
Exactly. So your inner child, exactly, your true self.
Yeah. And just on that, I just want to touch on sleep.
Yeah.
Looking at that from your blog, you spoke a bit about sleeping. And how important is it to have a routine for sleeping? Because I find for me, some days I'm going to bed a certain time, other days at another time, and that's obviously not really balancing your body if you're waking up at the same time but sleeping different times.
Yeah, I think first of all, kind of notice, just keep an eye on what your sleep is like, and when you feel good, what does your sleep look like, and when you don't feel good, what does your sleep look like? And you can take a note. So if you're already journaling, that can be a good start. Like our bodies work, so we have sort of like ups and downs in our energy levels throughout the day, and you can even kind of record those. So it's not that you have to be going to bed really early. It's just that you go to bed at a point where your body is naturally sleepy, because if you don't go to bed when you're, let's say if you're feeling kind of wired, going to bed, like it's unlikely that you're going to fall to sleep straight away. So sort of setting yourself up for success, because it can be really stressful if you get into bed and you're not sleepy and you really want to sleep and you have to sleep. That's going to get you into a cycle of stress, and you'll end up kind of, maybe being like wakeful or just not having a good quality of sleep. So that's really, really important. And it's not, again, the shoulds of I should be sleeping 9 hours a day, I should be this. There's some, most of us are not able to do what the textbooks say in terms of ideal sleep. So it's just kind of doing what you can do. And even things like looking at your day, and if you have room and if you have the ability to take a nap, there is a lot of people do that. I shouldn't be taking naps now. I'm too lazy now if I do that. But actually, if that gives you a boost of energy and helps you do things that normally you couldn't do without the nap, go for it. And so don't compare yourself with other people. Look at your own cycles, because some people are naturally early birds and some people are not, and trying to be an early bird when you're not, is not going to set yourself up for success. So sometimes you have to get up for work at a certain time. You've no choice about that. But maybe then just kind of look at what you can do in the day. Then if you're tired earlier on, to give yourself a boost. And it could be like that, kind of just taking a few minutes to meditate or doing something that naturally gets your energy levels up again.
Yeah, so if you're having trouble sleeping, maybe that's a good time to practice your meditation, calm the mind, the mind. Yeah.
So like the research shows that's it, like kind of, the screen should be off, lights should be lower. If you do have kind of screens, so I've got like a blue tint to my glasses, which they tell me helps a little bit, but just to do all of those things to sort of set it up that you're not having lots of stimulation, and set yourself up for success. And if you're not going to sleep, just try to take the pressure off, because if you're stressing about sleep, you're not going to sleep.
Yeah, you mentioned the phones there. I think what we failed to notice that, like, we mobile phones, it's designed to keep you on it.
Absolutely.
So if you go to bed on it, you could spend another hour there strolling.
Exactly. So even the light, kind of it's a really bright screen, and so you can turn your phone, if you do have to have your phone, turn it into like night mode. Ideally, you wouldn't have your phone. You could even sometimes listen to things. So I find listening to audiobooks very helpful, or you could listen to this podcast and
you can.
Exactly. And just don't be looking at your phone, and just kind of close your eyes. You'll find you're going to nod off much quickly than if there's a constant light in your eyes, and that's just natural. We wake with the sun, we get sleepier when it's dark, and so it's just all of this artificial light does have an impact on us, because we just don't know what time it is. It confuses the body. Yeah.
Super. There's a lot of information here. So if you're listening, again, we mentioned have an open mind when you're listening. If anything resonates with you, it's probably a good thing. And if it doesn't resonate with you, that's okay also. That is fine. And I just have one last question. Two last questions. That's off the topic. So first of all, I just want to say thank you. It's been great. It's been great chatting with you. And I've learned so much today. So I will probably listen back and learn more. I like to repeat learning. I like to repeat listening. Sorry. Repeat listening helps me learn. And I just have two other questions.
Yeah.
Off the topic altogether. So the first one is, what does well-being mean to you?
What does well-being mean to me?
Yeah.
I think well-being to me is going at my own pace, I think. So free of what other people think I should be doing, and really just focusing on my own goals, my own family, and just living life like to my true self and what I want that to look like. And so I think for other people like that, it looks differently. For me, I love to just nourish myself, have a daily yoga practice, make sure I'm reading lots of nice books, and just kind of have a nice pace of life and get out to nature regularly. If I don't have those things, I know for me that sends me off and my sense of well-being goes.
Yeah. And the last question then is, what are you proud of?
What am I proud of? Well, well, I suppose the first thing that comes to mind is I'm really proud of my children. And I think that's probably if I could pick an achievement, and if I was looking back in life, I would say my kids. When I look at them, they just bring me so much joy, and that's 100% what's important to me. So everything else, fades when I think of that. So that's it. For me, happiness is just being with them and making sure that I can be the best mother to them.
Yeah, great. You mentioned your website earlier on. What's the website again? Sorry.
So it's calmwithkatrina.com.
Calm with Katrina.
With a K, so I have to be a little bit different.
Yeah, there's always one. And you mentioned you have some painting there as well from your website, don't you?
I do. Actually, all the links to everything that I do is on my website, so you can find it all there. And definitely I have lots of recommendations for books and resources in relation to guided meditations and things like that. So if anything you heard me speak about today interested, you can have a look. And and my focus is on providing all of this information for free. So any of the guided meditations and things like that are also free. So that's something that's really important to me, that everything mental health related should be accessible for everybody.
Yeah, no, that's great work. Great work. So that was my last two questions.
Thanks a million. I really appreciate you having me on, James. It was lovely.
Thank you. I don't know what all the stress was about.
Well, you can listen back now and you can be doing all those things now tonight.
Yeah, I definitely would be doing meditating. For me, I found breathing exercise worked best for me.
Definitely. What type of breathing have you done? Yeah.
I do box breathing quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I do I think it's 5-7-3 or something like that. Yeah. I do that quite a lot, and I think that just kind of calms my mind. And, And then
have you tried any of the kind of the yoga breathing? Because there's loads of different types of breathing there. So there's
yoga breathing.
Yeah, there's different types. So there's one called Ujjayi breath. There's fire breath as well. So all of these, some of them can kind of get you energized as well. And so we could look them up anyway. And maybe for the morning, not like a night time. No, exactly. So some of them are brilliant because there are things that I just had never tried before, and then when I did them, and for kids, the kids love them. So definitely have a look at it.
Yeah, a bit of breathing and some music in the background.
Definitely, music is big, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, music in the background helps calm my mind so I can sleep.
100%. Yeah. I'm the same. So that's it. Kind of just before bed, I'll listen to some music as well, and it's definitely helps you switch off.
Super. Sorry, I'm going to. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a quick review on my Facebook page, Don't Be Afraid to Talk, or DM me on Instagram. The show notes will include all of the relevant links from today's episode. If you haven't already, please download, leave a rating, and share with your friends. You might just reach that person who needs to hear this message. Please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. I am James Lumumba, signing off with gratitude.